Third reading, still from the book of Ruth. This time comes from chapter 4, verses 13 to 17. It can be found on page 127 in your copy of the story. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, "Naomi has a son." And they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. And this is the word of the Lord. Amen. And this week, I breathed a sigh of relief. Thankfully, we now have a love story. After a couple of weeks that have, quite frankly, been horrific, filled with murder and with bloodshed, that left the pastor wondering where the good news could be in all of this, we've worked our way in recent weeks through Joshua and through Judges, through the walls coming down in Jericho, and acknowledging all the faults of those who would be judges and leaders of Israel. And so maybe you, like me, were happy now to read a love story. We're happy to read about Ruth's devotion to Naomi and about Boaz's provision for both of them. I was happy to read in verse 16 of chapter 1, as Ruth said to Naomi, "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." It's the perfect setting for a Broadway musical, isn't it? And so I admit a song entered my head. Wherever you go, whatever we do, we're gonna go through it. We may not go far, but sure as a star, wherever we are, it's together. Wherever I go, I know he goes. Wherever I go, I know she goes. No fits, no fights, no feuds. No egos, amigos, together. It's a great story. But it left me asking, is this a total disconnect from where we've been? Is this part of Israel's history so disconnected from Joshua and Judges that we wonder if this is part of God's continuing plan? Is it a total disconnect? I find that it's not. That even from the fact that Israel was experiencing a famine, that God was judging them for their disloyalty and unfaithfulness. This is not disconnected from what Israel has been going through. I believe that for the women to return at harvest time is significant when you consider that the land had been going through a famine. They didn't just return to a land that was starting to become plentiful, but they returned to a land where harvest was in full bloom. I find some other ways that the story of Naomi and Ruth is strongly connected to what had been going on in Joshua and Judges. Boaz, do you remember who his mother was? Rahab, the prostitute who received the spies that Joshua sent across to scope out the land, who protected them and hid them under the sheaves on the rooftop, who let them out the window using the scarlet cord and provided their safe exit. Rahab would become the mother of Boaz. And the Moabites, oh, they've been present in Israel's past, haven't they? They were arch enemies. Moab first was the son of an incestuous relationship between Lot, Abraham's nephew, and Lot's daughter. Moab is the Moabites are the ones who hired Balaam to curse Israel. Balaam and his donkey that spoke. But did Balaam curse God's people? Not in a million years. Though maybe he was tempted and though he was urged on by the Moabites, he could not do what God was not commanding him to do, and so he could not curse the people of Israel. The Moabites are the people from the other side of the tracks, the other side of the Dead Sea. The Moabites and the Israelites were enemies and had fought before, but now listen to what happens. The son of the prostitute is marrying a woman from Moab, and why? To preserve the family line of an Israelite. Now we move from Broadway to a soap opera. The key thought that I'm led to share with you today is this. We are called to be stewards of resources and relationships. You and I are called to be stewards. You know what a steward is, a caretaker. We take care of what does not belong to us. In the church, we realize that everything we have belongs to God and is given to us by God. And so as stewards, we give a portion of what we have back to the Lord. I hope to expand maybe our rather narrow view of stewardship by saying that we are called to be stewards of resources and relationships. I believe Boaz models both of those areas for us. Ruth arrived back in the promised land. Ruth arrived at harvest time and found herself gleaning in the fields of Boaz. For those of you who aren't familiar with the act of gleaning, gleaning is the intentional act of leaving a portion of the harvest to be collected by the poor in society. Gleaning is an intentional act. You see, when Boaz sent his workers into the field to harvest the crops, he was not concerned. In fact, he most likely directed them not to clear the edges of the field. And if they drop some of the harvest, allow it to stay, because there would be others coming behind them. The poor, the less fortunate in society, would find available in the fields the gleanings that they could collect for their own benefit. Why do I believe that Boaz would have done this intentionally? Why do I believe that Boaz may have actually instructed his workers to do this? Because in one of those books of the law, Leviticus chapter 19, we read these verses 9 and 10. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap the very edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time, or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. It was part of God's character, part of Israel's history that they would leave the gleanings. Boaz would have realized that the abundant harvest he had to collect was a gift from the Lord. And so he was to leave a portion of that for the poor to come and gather for their own benefit. It was not for him to glean every last drop that existed, but to leave it for others, because he was a steward of what God had entrusted to his care. Just 2 years ago, my son Adam and I had the opportunity to be gleaners. Believe it or not, farmers, landowners still allow for gleaning today. Adam was a member of a local 4-H club over in New York, and one of the opportunities we had was to get together with other 4-H clubs to be part of the Glean team. And in this particular instance, and there were 3 or 4 opportunities every fall, but in this particular instance, we went into apple orchards. And we were invited to glean the apples that were left on the trees. Yes, the farmhands had taken most of the crop of apples off of the tree, and they had been used for the profit and the well-being of the farmer and his employees, and they were sold at market. But there were some that were left, and the farmer did not send his workers back out to get every last decent apple that was around. But it was offered to the community. Now, Adam and I did not gather those apples and bring them home, but they were put in a huge truck, and they were then distributed to local food pantries so that the poor and the less fortunate would have the benefit of the gleanings from the field.